Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to talk about the movies. This is episode 17 of the movie proposal. I'm Skye Jatani, and joining me is Josh Lindsay.
Hey, everybody.
And Jason Rugg.
Hello.
Over on the computer, checking facts and details for us, keeping us sounding good. This episode, we have a couple of new things to talk about, a new movie and everything, but we always begin with something old. So, Josh, have you seen a movie recently, or do you want to propose a movie from the past?
No, I actually saw this one, and it's actually old.
So it meets both criteria.
Yeah, I saw it recently. Yeah.
Okay.
So All the President's Men.
Yeah.
1976.
Yeah, it's about Watergate.
It is. Do you remember who's in it?
Yes, Robert Redford.
Yep. And the other one?
Oh, shoot. Who plays Bernstein?
Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman, that's right. Yeah.
Now, there are other big name actors in there. Jason Robards, Hal Holbrook, and a few other guys.
What made you watch this?
Well, I needed to watch something old.
And it just came up on your list?
Well, no, it was on Netflix. It was something, I think it was nominated for a couple Oscars. I'm a Dustin Hoffman fan, kind of a Robert Redford fan. Mm-hmm. And it was historical. And I thought, oh, this seems interesting. But it was just available, and I was looking for something to watch.
Were you previously familiar with the whole Watergate scandal? Not just what it was, like details?
Not the details, just the major bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it fascinating to learn more about it. Mm-hmm. Here's some names I was familiar with. But I just liked how it unfolded in the movie, just how far did this really go? Did it go all the way to the top? That sort of thing. And these guys pushing the Washington Post to take this story so they could run it all the way.
If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to look it up right now.
Okay.
I believe that Bob Woodward, the real Bob Woodward, not Robert Redford, grew up in Wheaton.
Really?
Yeah. I'm going to look that up.
All right.
But so there is a Wheaton connection to...
Well, it's kind of there's mysterious, there's Deep Throat in it, and how he gets his information. Did Nixon really know, who at the top, knew what was going on, and then just the question of the journalists and what they should be talking about and shouldn't be talking about, and really how scary it was for the paper to even go down this path.
Yeah.
And then think about where we are today with journalism and politics and so forth.
Well, it's a great story to juxtapose with where we are today.
Yeah.
Because it's so different. And actually, I've heard Bernstein recently talk about, kind of grieve where we are as the journalism profession has kind of been swallowed up by entertainment.
Yeah.
And what used to bring down an entire presidency, now it's like, oh, whatever.
That's right. No, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I thought that was interesting because there was really a lot of pushback. And this can't be happening. We're talking about the presidency here, the White House, right? You need to tread carefully, because if you're wrong, and if you're right, that's going to have repercussions that maybe we can't think about. But today, people are speculating when our current president is going to get impeached, right?
Right.
And what can we do to speed that up? And
yeah, it is a lot of people look at Watergate as the hinge point where Americans really lost trust in institutions. Because when something as sacred as the presidency can be corrupted like that, and not that there hadn't been corruptions in the past, but that it was blown up on the front page. And of course, this is happening on the tail end of Vietnam, and all kinds of things came out about the shenanigans that led to that war that were all fabricated by the Johnson administration. So one thing after another led to this total distrust of government. And now you would think somebody was completely naive to trust any politician or president or government institution.
Right.
It's like, you're ridiculous. Good recommendation. I like it. So my recommendation for something old kind of relates to the new movie we're going to talk about. 1983, The Right Stuff.
Oh.
Do you remember that movie?
You know what? I never saw it.
Oh my goodness. This is why we have this segment, because you have to see this movie.
The Right
This is a
Stuff.
movie I have seen.
Really?
Wow.
You've seen it? Yeah.
Come on.
So it's based on a book written by Tom Wolfe, which chronicles the early U.S. space program, the Mercury 7 astronauts, the whole ramp up to the space program and competing with the Soviets and everything. But what's interesting about the film, and I think the book as well, is it's not a documentary, although there's a lot of great historical facts in it. It really follows the relationships of these astronauts with their families, with one another, with the backdrop tensions of the Cold War. And NASA just gets formed, and they're going to send people up into space. And one of the early questions they have is, well, what should make you qualified to be an astronaut? There was no, I mean, should they be a scientist? Who goes up into space?
Yeah.
And it kind of explains how they eventually came to the decision to use test pilots, like Air Force pilots who fly planes, to actually be astronauts. And the astronauts then get chosen, including John Glenn and Alan Shepard and those guys. But they're kind of all annoyed because they don't really pilot much. Right? You're just stuck on the top of this giant rocket.
You go for a ride.
Yeah, they shoot you up there. But it's a really well done movie, beautifully shot, great insights into the whole time period. I remember watching this as a kid. I probably didn't see it in 1983, but sometime in the 80s I saw it. And as a kid in the 80s, I remember watching the space shuttle, the first launch of the space shuttle. Like that whole era, we still felt like space was the future. Mm-hmm. And you go to Epcot and Future World, Futureland, and Disney World, whatever, and you still had this sense of, one day we're all going to go into space, and there's going to be space stations. So it was that time period, and then this movie comes out to show how quickly we went from nothing to, this full-fledged space program, putting a man on the moon, and it's a great movie. It's well acted. So I can't.
I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, you got to see that movie.
All right,
it's fantastic. It's a really very good
well, I'm
movie.
looking forward to it.
Okay. So, something new. Introduce our movie.
All right, so this is from last year, 2016, Hidden Figures. So this is an Oscar film. The story of a team of African-American women mathematicians who served a vital role in NASA during the early years of the space program. So this was nominated for, I think, 3 Oscars. One of them was Best Picture. Mm-hmm. Octavia Spencer and Kevin Costner star in it, as well as 2 other actresses whose names I'm going to botch. Tara G. Henson, and then Janelle Monáe, I think.
Okay.
I recognize them all by face, but names, I couldn't. Anyway, so I watched this with my family.
Yeah.
And I think you did.
Yes, we did too, all of us.
All right. Well, here's my proposal. I propose Hidden Figures plays more like a real-life Disney sports movie than a true Oscar contender.
Wow. I wasn't expecting that.
It sounds like I'm knocking the film.
Yeah.
And I kind of am, but I don't want it to come across that way. I just thought it was interesting that this film, which I was really impressed with, but I was more impressed by the story, mm-hmm. the real life story of these women, mm-hmm. and what they had to go through, and then just what they had to do to get a space shuttle into space, and just forgetting that there weren't computers back then. They had to do everything by hand.
There were computers. But they called people computers.
Right, that was the other thing. I was confused. They kept saying computers. I'm like, wait a second. They're calling the people the computers. And so I hadn't really just thought about that in a while, So, and then just on top of just the amazing accomplishments they had at NASA, just the obstacles they had as women mm-hmm. and as African-American women. Mm-hmm. And so the story itself is inspiring. And so we did watch it as a family, and we did have great discussions. But I think because it is so inspirational and that sort of thing, and they had to take, and everything in there was pretty much true, but they had to do it in such a way to make it interesting as a film.
Right.
It made it feel more like a Disney movie to me.
It did have that vibe. Yeah, I agree with you.
Kind of glossy, kind of plastic. We watch a lot of, when we're sitting down as a family, like on a Friday night, trying to pick a movie, which is always a battle.
Yeah.
We usually fall back, or we try to fall back on something like a Disney true life sports film, like The Rookie or Invincible or something like that. And all of us, we love true stories. We want to see the good guy win. And in a sports film, you've got the moment. Okay, they're working up towards the Super Bowl or the championship, mm-hmm. or does he make it into the major leagues? And here it was, will these women, accomplish whatever it was they wanted to accomplish, whether it was to get promoted or earn the respect or whatever it was in terms of getting the people into space.
Yeah.
But overall, I loved it. And I thought it was great. And I hope, because it was nominated for an Oscar, that they make more films like this. But I wasn't convinced it was Oscar worthy.
One thing, this isn't my proposal, but one thing that surprised me was that this story hadn't been told before.
Yes, that was surprising too.
Because it is a remarkable story. It is really inspiring, and it's like, man, it's 2016, 2017. Why did it take so long, 50 years, more than 50 years, to really acknowledge that it's a great story?
You know what's funny? Ron Howard, when he made Apollo 13, that's the same thing he said. He said when he came across that story of those astronauts, he said, I can't believe no one has told this story
Right,
yet.
yeah, there's occasionally you bump into a movie like that. You're like, how was this hidden?
Right.
You get it? So my proposal is also, it's coming out of the experience I had watching it with my kids. I think I would have probably brought a very different proposal had I watched it alone or if I'd watched it just with my wife or another adult friend. But I watched it with my kids, and so for that reason, I propose that Hidden Figures is sort of an ideal family movie to introduce kids to the historic reality of segregation and the Cold War. So my youngest daughter is only 9, and we had to like pause the movie repeatedly as we're watching it because she couldn't believe the various issues of segregation that were going on.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and she probably has some vague understanding that there's racism and our country hasn't, slavery and basic things she's learned in school. But I don't think she understood segregation and how recent it was and how it affected people. As practical as the fact that there were no colored bathrooms for women in this building that's depicted in the movie. And so one of the main characters has to run or walk like 40 minutes across NASA's campus,
half a mile.
Yeah, to go use the bathroom. I mean, just ridiculous things like that. So there are wonderful, wonderful movies that depict the realities of racism and segregation in our history. I'm thinking of Selma most recently about Martin Luther King Jr.
Did you see that?
I did.
Okay.
But that's not a movie I'd probably want my 9-year-old to watch because it's so graphic and so painful to watch that I hope at some point she will watch a movie like that and study those kinds of things. But this felt like, your comment that it felt like a Disney sports movie, I agree with, which is what made it a good entry point for a younger kid and for us to begin having these discussions about that.
Yeah.
For my older kids who are 12 and almost 15, they knew a lot of that history. They'd studied it. They'd seen it depicted in other films and stories and books. The conversations I had with them were more about the Cold War. And like, what was the big deal about the Russians and space, and why was there so much panic going on in the country about getting someone into space and Sputnik and all that? And the part that isn't directly talked about in this film, but a topic that I think people don't give enough attention to, is how pivotal, is that a word?
I like it.
Pivotal? How pivotal the Cold War was to the civil rights movement in the United States.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't, so explain.
Well,
a short rod or shaft on which a related part rotates or swings.
Pivotable?
Mm-hmm. It's a thing.
All right. That means something can pivot.
Apparently.
It's pivotable.
Yeah.
Well done.
Not to be confused with pitiable or pitiable.
Or pitiful.
Pitiful. Anyway, the Cold War. So it's not by accident that you see tons of advances in civil rights happening in the late 50s and 1960s at the height of the Cold War. And part of the reason for that was a number of factors going on. I don't want to simplify it down to one thing, but we often talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement and all these different things happening. But one of the things that actually motivated leaders in Washington, including President Kennedy, President Johnson, to legislate on these points rather than just brush it aside, including Eisenhower when he was president in the 50s, was the fact that the Soviets were going around the world and blasting the United States for being hypocritical about freedom and saying, hey, America holds itself up as being this great shining city on a hill, this beacon of democracy and freedom, but look at how they treat their own black population in the country.
Really?
Yeah, they were making hay out of this all over the world. It was a PR nightmare for the United States. And you got to remember, there's a lot of countries around the globe who are oscillating between, do we side with the West and the United States, or do we side with the Soviet Union? India, for example, where my father was growing up at the time, was on the fence about would they side with the Soviet Union or America.
Wow.
And one of the arguments that the Soviets were using was, you're never going to get a fair shake from the United States because they're racist. Because look at how they treat...
Were the Soviets not racist, or were they just calling the Americans out?
They were calling the Americans out. I mean, the Soviets, they tended to view the world through economic lenses, not racial lenses. So the Soviets were making hay out of this. They were calling out the hypocrisy of the United States, and that's why Kennedy and others were like, okay, we need to pacify this whole issue of race because we can't win the global public relations battle when we have this embarrassment in our own backyard.
So they're kind of pressured into it.
They're pressured into it, but you see that in this movie a little bit because there's so much pressure in NASA to get rockets into space, to get a man into space, to get satellites into space, that at the end of the day, the administrators at NASA don't care if the person pushing the pencil and doing the math is black or white. They need to get someone into space. So the urgency of the Cold War, whether it was the PR realities of the Cold War or the space race or whatever, the urgency of the Cold War forced the United States to deal with some of its racism and put higher goals ahead of segregation.
Interesting.
So we kind of downplay the impact that had, but it was a significant factor in moving us forward in these issues. And frankly, I think it's something that we lack today. There's no real great incentive for the United States right now to do a better job with issues like race and inequality because we don't have a great competitor in the world that we're trying to, rise above. So I'm not advocating that we go back to the Cold War, although history may be taking us there. But there is a case to be made that when you're in competition, you become a better person, right? You strive, and that's what the capitalist system is really kind of based on.
Okay.
So America without a competitor, we don't tend to become our greatest selves.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you said it was downplayed. I've never heard it explained that way
Exactly.
before, so.
You've never been. I think the reason it gets downplayed or ignored is because you don't want to diminish the great accomplishment of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr.
I see.
But he knew this as well, and he played it. He played that card significantly to talk about the hypocrisy of the United States on the global stage.
Well, yeah. Well, you would want something like that to be born out of compassion more than we want to beat the Soviets.
Yeah, and I hate to say we're not the most compassionate people, but I mean, again, this movie shows it. I don't think it was the great. Kevin Costner plays this NASA administrator, and he really advocates for the black women who are his computers. I'm using air quotes, the people doing all the calculations.
They actually call them computers.
Right. They did all the calculations of the complex geometry and stuff for the rockets. And he tears down the colored sign in the bathroom and all this. And you'd like to believe he's doing that because he's an upstanding, righteous, wonderful man. And maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But ultimately, he did it because they had a job to do.
Right.
And segregation was preventing them from accomplishing the task. And that message, that practical message, I think, is one that if you talk or read civil rights leaders of the time, Martin Luther King knew this. He advocated for the bus boycott in Montgomery because he knew that the whites in Montgomery would never, out of the goodness of their hearts, break down segregation. And he said, we need to hit them where it hurts, which is in the pocketbook. In their wallet. Yeah. So they were willing to leverage these political, global realities, the space race, economics, whatever, in order to get white people in power to do what was right, even though they didn't want to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's just a reality of social change. It's not going to happen just by appealing to people's hearts. Sometimes you have to appeal to politics, whatever. So yeah, I thought that this movie did a great job of kind of introducing that reality of the civil rights movement that we don't talk about all that much and put it in its broader global context of the Cold War.
Well, overall, I thought it was a fantastic film. I'd recommend it. Like I said, I saw it with my kids, and we had some good discussions about it too. So
yeah, so watch it with your family, watch it with your kids, have those conversations, be willing to pause the movie and discuss it. I think if you haven't had these kinds of conversations with your kids about racism, segregation, that sort of stuff, you probably haven't if you are a white family. If you're a minority family, you probably have to have these conversations or already have. But if you haven't had these conversations, this would be a good movie to kind of jumpstart it.
And I this is based on a book, and so obviously you want to learn more about it, check the book out. And I hope I don't know if anyone has, but I hope someone makes a documentary so they can dive more into it than what Hidden Figures could have enough time to do. Yeah,
I'd be curious to know if there are video documentaries somewhere on this, but they should. You're absolutely right. Okay, so that's something new. What's something borrowed?
Okay, so we got an article from Popular Mechanics.
Which isn't normally where you draw articles from.
No, it's not.
For this podcast.
No. There was another one from the Smithsonian, but I thought, hey, it's Popular Mechanics. Let's. Anyway, the true story of Hidden Figures and the women who crunched the numbers for NASA. So this came out in February by Matt Blitz. And what caught my eye was the true story. Because I know this is a movie. It kind of felt a little glossy to me. I'm like, all right, what really didn't happen and did happen in there? And bottom line, what the article, it revealed a few things, but one of them that it revealed was all the events that happened there were true.
Yeah, they didn't totally fictionalize this whole thing just to make a compelling movie.
Right. And now they did say there were moments where something might happen that it didn't happen in that order. For example, when John Glenn is about to board the space shuttle or the rocket ship.
Yeah.
And they're not sure if the computer's got the right, calculations. And so he says, have the girl run the numbers, and if she's good with it, I'm good with it. And so she's doing it in a matter of minutes. And then she says they're good, so he's good with it. Well, it's true that he did say that. But it's not true that it happened right before he was about to board.
Yeah, well, that's added for dramatic effect.
Right.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things. But overall, I was reading the article expecting to hear, I knew it. That never happened.
Yeah.
But no. Everything that they showed happened. And once again, that kind of goes back to the whole Disney thing where they take an amazing story and there's really only so much you can do with it where it's just this happened and then this happened and then this happened. And because it is amazing, that's enough to carry it through. But you're just kind of telling the story, so there's not a whole lot of opportunity for cinematic development and to get real creative. But anyway, that's beside the point. I did think it was interesting how true the story was, but also it did dive into a little bit of the history, kind of like what you were talking about with the Cold War, where in 1941, Roosevelt had an executive order where he was banning discrimination of employment for defense industries or government or those kinds of things because they're like, we can't waste time.
That's right.
Squabble.
We got to beat the Nazis and the Japanese here. This is ridiculous that we're taking really good qualified people and. Right.
There was a pressure that made them do that.
Exactly.
So I thought that was interesting. But did you get a chance to read it?
I skimmed it. I also read an article. I don't know if it was the same one. Right after I finished watching the movie, I looked up on Google some article about, what was true and what was made up about the movie and came to the same conclusion that you did. I was kind of surprised that the movie was as accurate as it was. I do know that Kevin Costner's character, they said, was sort of an amalgam of multiple NASA administrators over the course of the years of the movie. Rather than having a new person pop in every 20 minutes of the movie, they just made it one character who kind of represented NASA leadership in the form of Kevin Costner. But that's kind of a small...
Well, do you know, because there was an issue of segregated bathrooms where one of the characters who was black had to go a half mile just to use a bathroom and then come back, so she was gone quite a bit.
That was accurate.
Okay, that was true. But in the movie, Kevin Costner's character, takes a baseball bat and knocks down the
I don't know
sign.
if that was true.
Okay. Did they fix it? I mean, do you know if they...
Yeah, they did. I don't know how, again, did it happen in dramatic fashion like that with a baseball bat knocking down on the sign, or was it just an administrator said, this is ridiculous,
right.
We're getting rid of segregated bathrooms, and that was that,
Yeah.
So, yeah, sometimes you got to depict things graphically.
I was just curious how they solved the problem, because it sounded like the problem was real, but like what did the NASA do to fix it? But anyway, it made for an interesting scene in the movie. So.
Yeah, and I mean, both the reference to Roosevelt and World War II and then NASA, there is a historical precedent in the United States that government and especially military have been kind of on the leading edge of integration from the get-go. So, yeah, anyway, it's worth researching the story more in article form, whatever. Okay, we're at our last segment already. Something that blew our minds, or that blew chunks that we've seen recently. You're probably going to guess what my contribution is going to be.
Oh, wait.
Because it's been a little while since we've recorded one of these.
I'll think about it.
Okay.
Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
All right. Well, mine is a blue mind.
Okay.
And it's another Oscar film, Manchester by the Sea.
Okay, I have not seen it. I've heard about it.
Yes. So this is the Casey Affleck one.
Who I'm so not a fan of.
Well, as a human being...
I'm not saying that. I don't know the guy.
Well, I know. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying as an actor, I've never seen anything in it that I was super thrilled with.
First of all, you have to see the Dunkin' Donuts Saturday Night Live commercial with him in it. You know, the Boston one. Just Google SNL, Dunkin' Donuts, Casey Affleck. One of the funniest Saturday Night Live commercials they've ever done. So that right there.
Okay, good to know.
Gone Baby Gone.
Never saw it.
Oh my goodness. Dark, sad, hard film to watch, but great film and great acting.
I don't see dark, sad, hard to watch. So I don't.
Good Will Hunting, he was decent in that.
Yeah, but he was just playing his brother's brother. I mean, that's typecasting.
Well, he was fantastic in Manchester by the Sea.
He got an Oscar for it.
He did, and he deserved it, I think. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of him as a person.
I don't know anything about him personally, except he's
and honestly,
his brother's
the less
brother.
I know about an actor, the better. But as an actor, he was fantastic. And this is where he's an uncle, and his brother dies, and so he goes to take care of his nephew. But this story unfolds, and Casey Affleck's character is very sad. He's a gloomy kind of character, and you gradually learn more and more about his character and why he became this way.
Mm-hmm.
If you're into great acting and a great screenplay, and you're okay with something that's terribly, terribly sad, but has some redemption at the end, then this is the film you want to see.
Wow.
But if you are not ready for something sad, my wife and I saw this, and we just carried it with us for days. It's just the sadness of it.
Why would you do that to yourself?
I didn't know it was that sad.
Okay, well, now you've warned everybody.
I'm warning people,
I
so
love
get ready.
The plot keywords: nephew, uncle, death of brother, Massachusetts.
Here you go.
There you go.
Now you know more.
Yeah, I know there's been buzz about that movie for quite a while. Everyone's Oscar this and it's great that. And I just keep going, I'm sure it's well made and all that, but I don't want to carry a movie around for days.
And I don't blame you. And so skip it.
At least not in this season of my life.
Yeah.
I can't bear it.
No, and yeah, I won't say anymore. I was going to say more, but I'll just ruin
But it did blow your mind.
Oh, he was great.
Okay.
Yeah. The movie was
so
great,
the hype
yeah.
was not hype. It was legit.
No, it was legit.
Okay. Well, my something, and to be fair, I don't know if this is a blow my mind or blows chunks
Is it a
yet.
movie?
No, it's a trailer.
Well, we just talked about Thor.
Yeah. The Last Jedi.
Oh, duh.
Star Wars Episode 8.
That was like 2 weeks ago.
I know. It's been a while, but I've been stewing on this. I've been stewing. So the trailer I thought was really good. There's that funny thing where they play this trailer for The Last Jedi concurrent with The Force Awakens, and it's like beat
Identical.
by beat identical. So they clearly have their formula figured out. But a lot of people have been breaking down the trailer and trying to analyze what's going on.
I want to know what you think.
Okay, I am afraid.
Uh-oh.
I am very afraid, which leads to the dark side of the Force. Fear leads to anger,
Yeah,
and anger
I'm
leads
with
to
you.
hate. So here's my concern. I have two concerns, and I hope I'm wrong. I really, really hope I'm wrong. As much as I liked The Force Awakens, my criticism of it was that it was too derivative of A New Hope, right?
A little bit.
A little, yeah. I mean, you got another Death Star, you got, all that same
right.
desert planet, all that. And as I looked at this trailer, I am very concerned that it's going to be too derivative of The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, I can put your fears to rest.
I don't know if you can.
Well, the director said it's not.
Well, of course he's going to say that. But look at the trailer. Okay, a couple things. Number one.
Well, it's a trailer.
It's clear that Luke is training Rey just the way that Yoda trained Luke in Empire Strikes Back. And they're in a very isolated environment, not a swamp on Dagobah, but on this island on Ahch-To. And while she's being trained, her friends are off fighting the First Order, just as Luke's friends were off, fighting. And there's that whole tension. You have Darth Vader in The Empire Strikes Back searching for Luke, and here we know that Kylo Ren is searching for Rey. And even in the trailer, you had that scene with the ship skimming over the surface of a white-looking snow planet, but it wasn't snow because it's kicking up like this red dust behind it.
It's a coal money type planet.
Right, but it's got that look like Hoth, right? And in the distance, you see Imperial walkers, and I'm like, come on, guys! Like, here's my concern. My big concern is that the prequel Star Wars movies were killed by an over-reliance on CGI rather than good storytelling. My fear is that this new trilogy is going to die by an over-reliance on nostalgia rather than making good original new movies. That's my concern with this trailer. Here's my other big concern. That's kind of number one.
All right.
Here's number two. I'm worried that they are seriously going to screw up the Force.
Like just change it, like kind of like.
Well, from what I'm reading, what's coming out, like all the leaked information about where they're going with all this, and from the trailer, it appears, in the original trilogy, and I was just watching some of the movies this weekend with my youngest daughter. One thing that was so good about the original trilogy is there was a light side and there was a dark side.
Simple.
It was simple. There was good. There was bad.
Yep.
There was evil there was righteousness, and there was it fit that kind of fairy tale formula. And some people go, oh, that's so simplistic, that's so ridiculous. Well, okay, fine. But it was one of the charming realities for children about Star Wars.
Yeah.
Now, what appears to be happening is they're introducing all this deeper mythology into the Star Wars universe through some of the other books and TV shows and stuff. And now they're talking about gray Jedi.
Yeah, I was reading about that. What is that?
So gray Jedi they're not light, they're not dark, they're a combination of the two, and they reside in the middle. And from the trailer, it sounds like, he asks Rey, what do you see? And she goes, I see the light, and I see darkness, and I see the balance. And then Luke is heard saying, it's so much bigger than you know. And it sounds like they're moving to this territory of there isn't really just light and dark. There's this gray area in the middle, which is where real power and and he says,
we all live in the gray, Skye.
Right. Well, and then there's this line at the very end of the trailer that the one thing he knows is that the Jedi must end. And everyone's like, oh, what does that mean? And it sounds like, from what I'm reading, that Luke comes to the conclusion that the Jedi were too dogmatic in their teaching and too strident and limited in their understanding of things. And he's gone back and researched the real origins of the Force, and now he has a bigger, fuller vision. And the Jedi way is over, and he's beginning a new kind of gray Jedi, thing in the middle. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Everything in our world is ambiguous already. Right. Like there are no set categories. Like gender is ambiguous, marriage is ambiguous, race is ambiguous, politics is ambiguous, right and wrong in every regard is ambiguous. Can we please just have the Force be something that remains unambiguous? Yeah. And it looks like they're going to go into that gray Jedi thing, and I don't know. Maybe they'll do a brilliant job with it and I'll end up loving it. I hope that's the case. But between the over-reliance on nostalgia from the original trilogy and now they're going to possibly do away with that wonderful storytelling element of good and evil, I'm just like, come on, guys.
Well, one of the big
throw me a bone
throughout Star Wars has been bring balance to the Force. You can't bring balance to the Force.
No. First of all, that piece of crap idea was introduced in the prequels.
Sure.
So I don't think.
Really?
Yeah, really? That came in episode 1. The prophecy of the one who will bring balance to the Force. That was all in episode 1. None of that was in the original trilogy.
I thought there was something about that in Return of the Jedi.
No.
Really?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing.
I would believe Skye.
Okay. Yeah, he's very passionate about this.
So
kind of a Sith thing.
And they've been totally fine with distancing themselves from original or the prequel mythologies like midichlorian. None of that is in the new Star Wars movies. So they didn't have to go for this whole balance business. But the story group at Lucasfilm, who's responsible for kind of okaying all the stories, whether they're in books or video games or animated series or movies, they've introduced this whole more ambiguous vision of the Force, and they have this Bendu character now who kind of lives in between the two. And so I get why they're doing it, because when you have this huge cinematic universe of Star Wars stories, you want to complicate things in order to make it interesting and have a bazillion storylines and make characters less dichotomistic between good and evil. And there's like, ooh, well, maybe this one's not super. But see, what was great about the old trilogy is you had Obi-Wan Kenobi and you had Luke Skywalker, who were sort of unambiguously good, right? And then you had unambiguously evil, Darth Vader, the Emperor, that whole thing. But then you had characters that were in the middle, like Han Solo, who he's a good guy, but he's a scoundrel, right? He's a pirate, and he'll shoot Greedo first, and all that. And so you had characters that could occupy that gray space. They didn't have to be Jedi or Sith, right? There were all these other people.
That's what made those characters bigger, is that they were so good or so evil,
right?
Yeah. That's what
and now, if all the characters are going to occupy that middle space, it's like, well, who? Come on.
When I saw the trailer and she said, "I see the dark, I see the light, the balance," the first thing that popped in my head was the Matrix trilogy, and how, in my opinion, it got ruined by making it too complex.
Exactly.
And into it, and it's like, oh my gosh,
that's a great parallel.
It was just easier when you knew who the good guys were and the bad guys were.
Exactly. So I don't know where they're going, but that trailer, I'm worried. I wish I saw. I mean, I was watching Return of the Jedi just yesterday with my daughter, the youngest daughter, and I'm like, okay, well, I remember watching that movie in the theater when I was a kid with my grandfather from India, who was completely just lost the whole time what was going on. But like you go to Jabba the Hutt's palace, it's like, oh my goodness, this was so original, right? The giant slug gangster character. And then you go to Endor with this forest creatures and he had teddy bears and all that. It's fun, but it was like things were original,
right?
And then I thought back to like The Force Awakens, and I'm like, there really were no original settings in that movie, right? You have a desert, you have Maz Kanata's cantina, basically, and you have another Death Star.
Yeah.
And there was nothing original about that. And now I'm looking at this new one going, okay, maybe there'll be something different about this Waterworld island planet thing where she's doing her training, but now we got a new Hoth with walkers. And I'm like, oh, come on, guys, give us something new. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. I'm just saying this trailer, as much as it was cool looking, you dig beneath the surface and you go, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
We all know we're going to be there the weekend it opens. So.
Yes, I will be. I will give them my money.
That's right. I will too.
All right. So thank you guys for hanging out for another episode. Tell us what you thought about Hidden Figures. If you've seen any other movies we've mentioned, we'd love to interact with you about that too. Be sure to rate us on iTunes so other people can find this podcast. Catch us on Facebook. You can get on my website, skyjitani.com. I have a new book coming out in just a matter of a few weeks, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about that. It's kind of an exciting project on my end. I hope you like as well. Josh, anything to plug?
You can follow me at Twitter, JQLindsay.
All right.
Is that what I'm kind of new to Twitter, but yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys. You can kiss this episode. Goodbye.
Sounds dangerous.
It is. Very dangerous.
Count me in.